All right, welcome to another meeting of your House Corporations Elections and Political Subdivisions Committee. We are today hearing the continuation of House Bill 49. Then we'll move to House Bill 134 and finally 142. In order to get through the agenda that we have today with those three bills, we left off with public comment on House Bill 49. I'm going to take public comment up until the 1 o'clock hour, and then we'll be cutting it off. But based on what I have signed up on the list, I think we'll be able to get through it all within the next 50 minutes. And then the other piece of information is we do have Representative Newsom, who will be joining us virtually. And Sandy, if you can hear me, I just need you to turn on your camera so I can count you as present. And with that, Barb, while you're getting that squared away, we'll have you call the roll.
Representative Chadwick, Representative Haraldson, Representative Harshman.
Excused.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Knapp.
Here.
Representative Newsom, excused. Representative Ottman. Excused.
Excused.
Representative Wiley.
Here.
Representative Yin.
Here.
Chairman Olson.
Here.
Thank you.
And if Sandy's camera comes on, we're going to count her as here. So, all right. With that, let's go back to House Bill 49. We heard first from our clerks, and now we need to hear from our Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Chuck Gray. I'm the Wyoming Secretary of State. Seated to my left is Jesse Naiman, our Chief Policy Director and General Counsel. Today, I ask you to vote no on House Bill 49. As written, House Bill 49 opens the door to a convoluted, confusing, and needlessly expensive voting process, which is antithetical to Wyoming's current uniform procedures for elections, while posing immediate logistical and fiscal complications. Speaking broadly, ranked choice voting is a system in which voters rank candidates on their ballot. If no candidate gets more than 50% of the first preference vote, then the candidate with the fewest first preference votes is disqualified. The votes are tabulated again, and the voter's second preference picks up those votes. The confusing nature of ranked choice voting leads to a number of perverse incentives. Should a voter fail or choose not to rank a candidate beyond their first choice, their ballot may be thrown out altogether through later tabulations. This phenomenon is called ballot exhaustion. Say if there were 4 candidates in a race and an individual only listed their top 2 candidates and those 2 candidates were eliminated. Their votes will not be considered. This disenfranchises voters by casting aside their ballots. It can also lead to a candidate winning by achieving a majority of votes that were not exhausted, but not a majority of all actual votes. For example, in Maine's 2018 ranked choice voting election for Congress, the Republican received more votes in the first round by about 1%. After the ranked choice tabulation, the other candidate won by about 1%. 7,000 ballots were thrown out due to ballot exhaustion, silencing 7% of voters in a 1-point race. The concept attempts to create a fictional runoff that does not really exist in the minds of voters. It also creates the potential for tactical plays where there may be a concerted attempt by certain campaigns to defeat what is considered the most acceptable candidate in the first round. Ranked choice voting is also linked to declining voter participation. No surprise there. The instructions for ranked choice voting are quite confusing, which contributes to ballot exhaustion and also to individuals not filling certain sections out, or that particular section out, especially with the optional element in this bill. Especially in this case where it would apply to the municipal elections, which already have less participation because it's at the bottom of the ballot, or it's been talked about that it would require a supplement, it would amplify that decline in participation. Just to discuss some of the jurisdictions that have less voter participation: Minneapolis, St. Paul, San Francisco. The data's there. This bill also jeopardizes the security of our elections. As you recall, in a bill last week, the committee codified the requirement, which is currently in rule, that all machines be EAC certified. The machines the state of Wyoming are currently using are not certified to conduct ranked choice voting elections. In order to do the tabulation, the clerks have said they would need to hire a third-party vendor. That third-party vendor's software is not EAC certified. So the bill would place our elections into uncharted waters with machine processes that are not EAC certified, or it's been discussed that there would be a hand count, which I find slightly ironic because a lot of the individuals proposing that are very opposed to having any hand review of ballots in other situations. Handling the counting of the ballots has proven to be a logistical challenge in other jurisdictions. In Alaska, the ranked choice calculation has routinely taken 2 weeks or more. New York City's ranked choice calculations took 2 weeks. In their 2021 mayoral election officials not only took weeks to count ranked choice ballots, but also incorrectly tabulated them, leaving everyone uncertain about the outcome of the mayoral race and what was dubbed its mayoral election debacle. 140,000 individuals were also disenfranchised due to ballot exhaustion in this election. Can you imagine the decline in the confidence in our elections with a process of counting that could take weeks or more? There are also obvious logistical problems with the bill as written. As indicated in multiple provisions, the bill assumes that the municipalities will, quote unquote, conduct or execute the elections process. For example, on page 6, which outlines the requirements a municipality must meet in order to participate in the pilot program, it provides that a municipality must provide written notice to the Secretary of State that the, quote, municipality has the resources and capability necessary for the municipality to successfully execute an election, unquote. However, as you know, municipalities do not have the equipment nor the training required to conduct or execute this election. Our 23 counties conduct our elections, so as written, a municipality would never be able to satisfy the requirements therein. Finally, the bill presents, at least with the machine count, finally, the bill presents several fiscal impacts. Because counties conduct municipal elections and counties would have no indication of which municipalities would opt into the ranked choice pilot program, it's been suggested that all 23 counties would find it necessary to purchase the necessary voting equipment add-ons, which are not currently in place, and be properly trained on these add-ons, in the process jeopardizing the security, such that they would be ready should any municipality opt into the pilot program. This purchase and training would cost approximately $100,000 in the first year and approximately $230,000 in year 2 and in each subsequent biennium to ensure proper implementation, which, according to the bill, the cities are going to pick up. While this bill is aimed at municipalities, the bill has the potential for short-term as well as far-reaching consequences. For many of the reasons I have highlighted above, I urge this committee not to forward such legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Gray. Committee, you have questions for the Secretary of State's office? No? All right. Thank you for your testimony. And I would like to take a brief moment to say welcome to my intern, Allie Van Wy, all the way from Chugwater, Wyoming, is here today to observe our meeting. So welcome, Allie. I won't make you testify on this bill, but one day I will make you testify. It's a good experience. Okay. In the room, public comment on ranked choice voting, House Bill 49. Please come forward. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and esteemed committee members. My name is Jen Lowe. I'm Executive Director at the Equality State Policy Center. This is my first time before this committee, and I would like to thank you for your time today. ESPC is a nonpartisan nonprofit that has been advocating for fair elections and transparent government in Wyoming for 30 years. Last year, ESPC submitted the topic of municipal ranked choice voting to the committee to be considered as an interim topic. Also known as instant runoff, ranked choice has been shown to increase civility in campaigns, create more issue-based debate, and give voters greater opportunity to express their preference for representation. The bill before you emphasizes local control, choice, and nonpartisan races. It is based on the statute that Utah adopted and has shown to be quite popular among voters and election officials. Senator Boner signed on to the interim topic after learning about the success that instant runoff has had in Utah. The reason you at ESPC originally suggested instant runoff as an interim topic was as a potential policy solution to the majority plurality issue. During the last couple of years, I have personally listened to several members of the public testify that they were concerned that elected officials were winning with less than a majority of the vote. The committee reviewed several potential policy solutions, including a runoff election, an open primary with a top 2 general election, and instant runoff or ranked choice. After considerable testimony, research, and debate, the committee decided to create support for permissive legislation that gives local governments the option to conduct nonpartisan races with instant runoff. No city, school district, or other local jurisdiction will be required to do anything. Again, I would like to emphasize that House Bill 49 is about local control, choice, and answering the public's concern that elected officials are winning with less than a majority of the vote. I would also like to add that more than 80% of voters in Utah that used ranked choice found it simple or very simple. I would also like to address ballot exhaustion. A voter can indicate their preference for as many candidates as they would like. But just as we don't force voters to participate on every issue on a ballot, we would never ask them to exhaust a ballot if they choose not to. It is also important to note that Alaska has historically waited 2 weeks to make a final tally on all elections because they want to make sure that all absentee ballots from around the state are collected. There have many towns that is tough to get to, and it can take weeks for mail to arrive on time. I do not want to take up more time than is necessary. ESPC has asked several experts from Utah to join today and to talk about their experience with instant runoff. I ask that you support House Bill 49 and give local government the opportunity to choose what is best for their communities. Thank you for your time and service to the great state of Wyoming. I'll do my best to answer any questions you might have.
Committee? Any questions? No? All right. Thank you for your testimony. And we will, I've got your folks signed up online and we'll get to them. Further public testimony, come forward. Yeah, come on up.
You do. I'm glad I'm not spending 2 months down in Cheyenne doing all your jobs. My name is Richard Jones. I'm from Park County. I'm representing myself at this point as a citizen, but I've been an election judge for a long time. I've been a precinct committee person, and I'm interested in the voting process, of course. Secretary of State Gray gave a pretty comprehensive view of the mechanics and the technical problems and issues with ranked choice voting. And if any of you followed that, I'm so happy for you. It can be very confusing. The previous comment too about one of the concepts that promotes ranked choice voting is the concept of plurality voting versus majority voting. And that oftentimes when a plurality system works, a person with less than 50% in particular voting scenario can be elected. That can be easily changed by changing whatever policy or regulation that is to a majority of the thing. A 50% plus one vote eliminates the plurality problem. It does result maybe in a runoff election, but it is a different system. I'd just like to talk briefly about the concept of ranked choice voting. I am against it. Our American system of representative democracy was designed to ensure competition of ideas, not personalities. It was found early on there were a couple of main concepts of governance. Most elected officials fell into two main philosophies about government. Those that supported a particular concept of governance formed groups or parties. They promoted or selected candidates who represented their view for general elections. A candidate to run for this office represented the views of that particular philosophy group. And over the centuries, this system has resulted in candidates representing competing ideas running against each other in a general election. Most voters often did not have the time or means to get to know candidates, but they were generally aware of party philosophies, regardless of the candidate themselves. The candidate supported by the party, a voter may not have known a candidate supported by the party, but they did know the philosophy of the party itself. This system of giving voters a choice in competing ideas has worked well for almost 250 years. Ranked choice voting turns elections into a personality contest. Where in place, and Alaska and Maine both have it on a statewide basis. California started this years ago in many municipalities and counties, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Secretary Gray said there are quite a few areas that are experimenting with this in counties and municipalities and nonpartisan elections. But it has proved overall to be confusing to voters in every case, particularly where it's a mixed bag of regular voting and ranked choice, which is what we would have with this bill. It would allow certain counties and municipalities to have it. It wouldn't be statewide, it wouldn't be all elections. So any given voter living where they were, if they moved, would have a different system to work under. The process favors candidates with more extreme views rather than moderates that the majority of voters support. Ranked choice voting almost eliminates the need for parties and primaries. In practice, ranked choice voting results in the last 2 or 3 candidates all representing the same philosophy. Therefore, you do not have a choice between ideas and concepts. You're looking at the personalities involved. The voter is no longer voting for an idea, but that personality. As I say, 20 or so counties and municipalities in California have had this ranked choice voting for a number of years. Alaska and Maine now use it statewide and federally. And in California, it has assured in most areas where it works, one-party rule. In Alaska this past fall, it found that the elected person who probably would not have made it to the general election because they only got they didn't have a majority support by most people, but in the ranked choice system, they consistently ran 2 and 3, not number 1, but because the 2 and 3 votes added up, they became the elected person, not supported by the majority of public by either of 2 mainstream parties. So again, it was it favors a minority view candidate. Not that they don't have a choice, but they have a choice by expressing their philosophy and being voted on in a general election, in my opinion. So ranked choice voting is a solution looking for a problem. I don't see what the problem is in Wyoming. Allowing this to take effect in municipalities will only result in voter confusion in the state, and I just don't think it's a good idea, period. And I appreciate you considering my comments, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Any questions? Committee Representative Yin, Mr. Jones.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Jones, so I did hear you say that that if we wanted to fix the plurality issue, that we just do a runoff election. And so from my understanding with the ranked choice that's being proposed in the bill, it's the method that's considered an instant runoff where you share what your second preference would be as if the lowest candidate was eliminated. So I guess my question to you is, why would a runoff be better than something where you would already share the vote of what you would vote in a runoff ahead of time in one election?
Okay, that's a fairly easy question to answer, because in the ranked choice voting process, you
Sorry, Mr. Jones.
you
Yeah, the process is you have to come through the chairman, so.
yes, I understand.
Yep.
So I was turning around.
That's all right. So you say, Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Chairman.
and then you can speak. You got it.
Thank you, sir. The process of the ranked choice voting, for most voters, they understand inherently who they want to vote for. Their second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh choice that they list on a ranked choice ballot, often when there are multiple candidates, there can be a dozen choices. They don't really understand those other voters. They're just putting them down. They don't necessarily know their philosophies or anything else. And when the instant runoff occurs, you get a person that people support gets bumped off the list because so many other people voted for a second or third choice without really understanding the process. So what you've done is you've eliminated the ability of voters to vote on competing philosophies. And people get eliminated, as the Secretary of State was saying, they get what voter exhaustion is. Voter exhaustion means that these people get dropped off the list just because they weren't ranked properly. And if you study the system, it's understandable, but it is confusing to the average voter. So to answer on Mr. Yin's question about the runoff part of it, I don't think it's fair because the voter does not have the choice in who those second or third people are. And in a 50% plus one runoff, you assure that the majority of those that had a choice between two competing candidates have their say. Did
Do you want to follow up, Representative Yin?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. So just so I can be clear, the reason that you think it would be worse than a runoff where we have a separate election is because the voter wouldn't understand the other candidates other than its primary preference. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman? In general, that's true. That's the way it works in practicality and the way people vote and think about things. I myself personally don't have 2 or 3 choices in mind for a candidate. I've picked my philosophy and my candidate and my choice. And in a ranked voting situation, the other problem that happens in ranked choice voting is you have this whole list of names and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In many cases, voters don't even vote for all the ranked choice people. They just vote for the number 1 or something else. So in the long run, that's part of what voter exhaustion means. In the long run, the ones that end up being ranked don't necessarily represent all the people that actually voted. They didn't vote for a number 2 or a number 3. So their vote for the number 1, if it doesn't get the majority, is now gone.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Any more questions? Thank
No,
you,
thank
sir.
you.
Appreciate the time.
You did good. Gail, come on up. I was going to ask you if you already testified on this bill, but I'm just thinking of every other bill.
I'd hate to have one go without saying something. Gail Simmons from Sheridan as a part of Civics 307. And I wanted to point out a couple of things. The previous speaker and the Secretary of State very eloquently spoke about the theory and broad application of ranked choice voting. I want to bring it back to this bill. This bill is about nonpartisan, municipal, optional elections. So all of the talk about, what would happen with thousands of people or all, it's just, this is about an optional, nonpartisan, municipal. So that is mayor and city council. And even in the largest municipalities of the state, Casper and Cheyenne, the likelihood of a voter not being able to figure out who the people are is very small. I mean, we're talking Wyoming here, not the others. So on ranked choice voting on this particular bill, the points are it is permissive, not directive. The municipality would have to ask for it and would have to pay for it. It cannot be applied outside of the municipality until the FEC certifies hardware and software to be used in any election that the federal government oversees. So this can only be applied to municipality. Again, the scope of this particular bill. The max cost of having a single municipality bring this in is $10,000. By the way, on what we've heard previously, Mr. Chairman, on the cost of a runoff is $1 million. If we have to have a runoff instead of ranked choice vote, but that again is broad and it's outside the scope of this particular bill. So what do we have? For RCV, and I would request that you and the members here ask yourself a few questions as you are listening to additional people testify. What are they afraid of in this particular bill? What are they afraid of? If you are for RCV, the absolute worst case, if you are for RCV, is that it is tried and no one likes it, or it doesn't work. That's the worst case if you're for RCV. And that would be at a municipal level. If you are against RCV, the worst case is that it is tried and people actually like it and it does work. And then and only then would it even have an opportunity for opening up once there is a federally elected to be outside a municipality. So I ask you to vote aye and allow the municipalities to take this on themselves. And I stand for any questions.
Representative Haroldson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Simmons, so first question, is exhaustion a potential option or a condition that could come out of this bill?
Ms. Simmons?
Mr. Chair, Representative Haroldson, I'm so glad you asked that because I actually had a note on that I forgot to cover. What appears to be the terminology exhaustion is under our current system called undervoting. And an undervote is when the number of people who have a ballot choose on their own willpower or will or right to decide not to vote for someone. And I can tell you that in 2020 in the primaries, in many cases at the highest level, that actually showed up in the thousands. That was for US Senator. In our 2022 at the high, it was the least I've ever seen, and the undervotes for the US Congressman was only 536. So they say, so the term exhaustion is, I think, a fancy way of saying, I choose not to vote. I don't know the person. I don't care. I don't like the choices, but I don't have anybody to write in.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Simmons. So if I were to vote for a certain individual on my first choice, but leave the rest of my choices blank, could I then be exhausted out of that election or out of being counted on that election, even though I did vote for a candidate?
Ms. Simmons?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Haroldson, currently when you vote in a nonpartisan election, if it's for the mayor, for example, and you have three choices and you only choose one, and the majority, the plurality is somebody else, your vote counted, but you didn't win. That's not exhaustion. The same thing occurs on a ranked choice voting. You could have selected 1, 2, and 3. You selected only 1 and 2. And so perhaps your second one gets counted in the second round. Or perhaps your first one won. But right now, if you vote for one person and they do not have the plurality, your vote counted. It just didn't make a difference in the outcome.
One more, sorry.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you made a comment that it would cost $1 million for a runoff election on a municipality with a 10,000 for a ranked choice. So where did you get that $1 million for a municipality runoff?
Ms. Simmons? That was the testimony we heard yesterday from the clerks.
That would be $1 million for the entire state runoff,
Yeah.
not for
Not for a county.
a municipality. So that was apples and oranges. I just wanted
Mr.
to
Chair.
clarify.
Through you to Representative Haroldson, that was in reference to a testimony that we heard just previously talking about having runoffs instead of ranked choice vote. So I was simply providing that as a comparison and thought I had qualified it, saying that that's actually outside the scope of this because that would not apply at individual municipalities. So I apologize.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. Committee. All right, thank you, Ms. Simmons. Additional public testimony in the room. Try to get Representative Slagle. I just tried to get all the public and then I'll come to any legislators if you don't mind. We have about 22 minutes remaining on public testimony and I still need to get to the Zoom world.
Mr. Chairman, I will only take 21 and a half.
You can, okay.
Okay. Chairman Olson, thank you, and committee, thanks for the time. I'm Tom Laycock, AARP Wyoming. AARP has 53 state offices, so we've had a little bit of experience with the instant runoff concept. had some conversations recently with our Utah and our Alaska state office, and what we're hearing is voter confusion amongst our members is pretty low. Part of that has to do with the fact that AARP did step up after this was, became a policy decision of those states to explain the process of instant runoff and ranked choice voting. That's important. I want to let you guys know that if you guys decide to move forward on this, we're happy to be a partner in explaining that once again. And that's important because we know, in 2020, about 156,000 of the 277,000 votes cast in the state by people 50 and older. We do well to communicate with our members. We have a huge email universe. We also are on local radio and local TV quite a bit. And we send a newsletter quarterly to 50,000 homes in the state that's still on paper. So understand if you do choose to move this forward, consider us a partner in explaining the process. So I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions for AARP? All right, thank you, Mr. Laycock. That was a quick 21 and a half minutes. Further public testimony in the room? Come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Matthew Link with the Wyoming League of Women Voters. For the past several years, we've taken a keen interest in this subject. We've been trying to educate people across the state. We've held all sorts of forums, both physically and virtually. We've currently adopted a position in favor of replacing our current dysfunctional plurality voting method with alternative voting methods, but the League does not currently have a position in favor of any particular alternative voting method. So with that said, I'll try to keep this quick because most people have already covered some of the things I wanted to say. So I'm going to start with terminology here. This is going to seem like total pedantry at first, but please bear with me. It would be very helpful to use a clearer common name for the voting method described in this bill. We've already heard it a few times. So the phrase ranked choice voting is, in common parlance, actually used to refer to at least two different alternative voting methods, and sometimes even more than that. So why does this ambiguity matter at all? Well, different voting methods can produce very different results in elections and government body composition. And it's very important that the public and legislators have the right expectations for the right voting method. So, as has been said already, the more precise name for the voting method described in this bill is known as instant runoff voting, or IRV. And using that terminology for clarity would be an improvement, and it would really be as trivial as just doing like a find and replace operation in a word processor. Okay, with that said, as you may know, voter turnout in the United States is some of the lowest in the developed world. The question is, why don't people vote? Now, there's surely lots of different reasons that people don't vote, but chiefly they stem from some kind of disillusionment with various aspects of the system. One of the reasons, I'm not saying it's the only, one of the reasons voters feel this way is that our current voting method and electoral system presents very strong pressures to vote tactically in elections. In fact, this pressure to vote tactically is ultimately responsible for the two-party system that has characterized the majority of American history. By adopting alternative voting methods, which encourage greater expressiveness from voters and less tactical voting, we would generally expect to see more participation in elections from traditional non-voters who want more competition outside two-party politics, and who in fact comprise either a plurality or a majority of the electorate, depending on the poll you look at. So for similar reasons, alternative voting methods which can make elections more competitive by diminishing incentives to vote tactically, are also expected to encourage more issue-focused campaigning. One of the reasons that elections in the United States are often so geared towards slinging mud at one's opponent, so geared towards personalities, rather than campaigning on what a candidate is actually planning to do for their constituents, is because candidates can get away with spending their resources on this activity when they have only one opponent they really need to worry about. By adopting an alternative voting method that encourages greater competition beyond two candidates, we would expect to see more issue-focused campaigning. Okay, the last point I want to make is several people before me have talked about this concept of exhausted ballots in an instant runoff ballot. Some people have used the word disenfranchisement to describe when this happens, when someone doesn't rank all the possible choices on their ballots. Well, first point I want to make on that is there's already a provision in this bill to not throw out exhausted ballots. So nobody, if the bill as written right now, nobody would have their ballot thrown out if they choose not to rank all the possible choices on it. The other point is when we're talking about disenfranchisement, really what we're talking about is how much can a voter express themselves on their ballots. And when everyone ranks only one option on their ballots with any kind of expressive alternative voting method, whether it's one that uses rankings or ratings, anytime a voter selects just one choice on their ballot, we call that bullet voting. And turns out that's functionally equivalent to a vote in a plurality system. It's basically the same thing when you only rank one choice. So even in the worst case scenario where people do that, they're still providing at minimum the same amount of information on the ballot we currently use. Okay, so with that said, happy to lend my expertise on this topic to answer any questions. Thank you.
What was your name again?
Matthew Link.
Link?
Link,
Link. That's easy to remember.
the missing link.
The missing link. All right. Any questions for Mr. Link? I appreciate your testimony. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Further public testimony. Come on up. Don't be shy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Committee, Marguerite Herman, and I'm with the League of Women Voters, and I know the time is short, so I'll be very brief. And Mr. Link is correct. The League has studied ballot, national and local levels, studied voting methods, have not come out in.
Can we just back up real quick? Did you say your name?
Oh,
You said you're with the League, but
I'm sorry, Marguerite.
we all know who you are, but we
That-
need it for the record.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for reminding me, Marguerite Herman. And I'll just say that it has been studied, and at least the State League in Wyoming has not come down to favor ranked choice voting. However, in general, the general posture is that something that increases turnout, which seems to be getting worse over the years, not better. This seems to increase, other cities have found it increased. At the very worst, it had no effect on turnout. And in some cases, it did increase turnout. Researchers have found out actually the thing that really gets turnout is a competitive race. And I think from Ms. Simmons talking about the congressional race in '22, we saw that was the effect there. So, this isn't going to completely turn the tables on the trend, but it does have usually a good effect. Let's see, it does allow more votes to count. It does respond to complaint. Well, I won't vote because my person won't win. I'm wasting my vote. So the disaffection because of a wasted vote, that it sort of addresses that. And it may, speculative, increase candidate filings, which and then obviously increases choice. But that's speculative, just that it might be an outcome of more people on the ballot having a chance to succeed. And I'll just will point out something that I think Ms. Lowe mentioned, that the only reason why we're here talking about this is because joint corporations in the interim heard loud complaints that the plurality system was not working, it was not fair, that sort of thing. Now, we're talking about partisan elections, which obviously is not part of this bill. But that's what turned the attention to a runoff, which on the face of it might be a solution, except what the county clerks told us, that the calendar just doesn't have enough days to accommodate a third election. They just can't fit it in. You'd be doing door-to-door campaigning in April. So there's no time without moving a lot of deadlines and the expense. So this was in response to that problem and looking for a way for an instant runoff. And you may decide that in fact plurality victories are not a big problem and defeat the bill for that reason. Again, that's sort of your judgment. I will say that what can we learn? And I think that's what this bill will tell us. What can we learn from a few cities and towns in Wyoming doing this? I think a lot of us don't know. A lot of it is speculation. It'll be the worst. It'll be the best. Let's find out what it does. And it is optional. It's permissive. I think that's the key play here. And so I'm just saying that if you want information, if you are looking for alternatives to a plurality, that this is probably the best method to do it. Nonpartisan, local option, and find out if it does have a benefit for the state. Instead of writing it off as a disaster, this is the opportunity to get data, and if that's valuable, I would say that would be a reason to vote for the bill. Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Herman?
Thank
I
you.
appreciate your testimony. Representative Slagle, come on up, and then I'm going to go. Is Wham testifying? Come on up. We have 12 minutes remaining in public testimony, and I do have a half a dozen people online too. And I set 2 days of testimony, and this is an interim topic. Go ahead, Representative Slagle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I speak against this bill, mostly for constituents in my district. I have heard numerous comments from them that they don't want ranked choice voting. And so that's basically what I wanted to say. Thank you. Any questions?
You were short and sweet to the point. Thank you. Questions for Representative Slagle? Appreciate your testimony. Wham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David Fraser, Executive Director, Wyoming Association of Municipalities. I almost didn't come to the table because we're neutral on this bill, but I thought it might be important to put on the record why we're neutral on that bill, and that's just the fact that it's optional. I think if there are communities that want to try this, that become the case studies, that's fine. They'll be able to take a look at the pros and cons and the expenses and make those choices. So I appreciate that it is optional in the bill, and I'd take any questions if there are any.
Questions for Director Fraser? All right, thank you. We appreciate it. Let's go to the Zoom world. Go ahead and let in Mr. Daniels. Then Mr. Lockhart will be on deck next, assuming they're still there. Oh, let's do it this way. I'm sorry. Raise your hand if you're in the Zoom world and you want to testify, and we'll let you in. Welcome, Mr. Glass.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Brett Glass, and I am a recent candidate for the Laramie City Council. And we have some unique conditions here, and some that will also apply to more and more Wyoming cities in general as they grow that really speak in favor of this bill. First of all, running for the city council is getting expensive. Times were when you could sign up for $25 and buy one ad for maybe $150, and that would be it. In the most recent campaign, some of the candidates spent thousands of dollars on the campaign, maybe even more than some of you when you campaign for the legislature. And of course, you have to campaign twice in the primary and the general election under the current system. So a rich candidate with one or more big backers has a big edge, and this is a problem in something which is supposed to be small and local. I was defeated in the most recent election narrowly because I ran out of money, and my opponent had one big banker. So in order to keep money from seriously controlling local elections, I think we need to consider this as a way of making them fairer. Having a single election reduces the cost to candidates and also avoids the possible expense if you might have a runoff election. So in all ways, it helps keep money out of politics, and I think that's a good thing. The other thing in particular in Laramie is that our electorate changes dramatically between August and November. The students and many UW faculty and some local residents are gone in August and back in November. Some candidates who were eliminated in the primary might have done well in the general, but their would-be supporters were gone, and so they were eliminated. The people who were going to be their constituents for most of the year didn't get a chance to vote in the primary and decide who would go on to the general. This is voter disenfranchisement, and it's a good reason to have one election when most of the people are around. Now, contrary to what some people may say, ranked choice voting isn't confusing. You simply indicate who you'd like to fill the seat in order of priority. I have not encountered anyone that I'm aware of in a state where or a city where they have ranked choice voting who finds it confusing. So in any case, I'd just like to sum up by saying that primaries primarily serve the purpose of helping parties to choose candidates that they're going to support. They're not really appropriate for nonpartisan elections, and they have the problems that that I've just mentioned. So let's try it. No municipality is forced to do this, but I think it's a good option, and I think it would solve some of the problems that I've mentioned today. I know your time's short, so I won't take any more of it. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Questions for Mr. Glass? Thank you, Mr. Glass. Folks, I've let 4 of you into the room. I'm down to 8 minutes with public testimony, so I'll give you each 2 minutes, and then I'll have to close public testimony as this is now day number 2, and we do only have an hour remaining for our other bills. So bear that in mind. 2 minutes. Mr. Whoever, just go ahead. Doesn't matter to me. Just somebody light up your microphone.
Hi, I guess I'll jump in.
Yep.
Thank you,
Go
Mr.
ahead and
Chair.
introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Derek Monson. I work at Sutherland Institute, which is a public policy think tank in Utah, where we've put some time into studying ranked choice voting in our municipal program here. That's the model for the legislation you're considering. And just like to offer a little perspective from our experience that might be relevant. Specifically to the issue of voter confusion, that has not been something that has been a problem here in the state of Utah in our experience. I actually used ranked choice voting myself. I live in a city where our city opted into it. It was fairly straightforward. The instructions were clear, and that's actually reflected in a broader survey of voters in the last municipal election cycle in 2021, where 80% of ranked choice voters said that it was easy to use, and 90% said the instructions were clear. So that just we haven't really seen those concerns rise systematically here. Second concern I'd like to speak to is the question of its impact on confidence in elections and voter participation. Those are also things that have not really had negative impacts for ranked choice voting here. In that same survey, they surveyed both ranked choice voters and non-ranked choice voters, and the level of confidence that votes would be counted was similar in each case, about 90%, so very high. And additionally, the time Utah has had its municipal ranked choice voting program, voter participation has actually been on the rise, on the increase. So that just hasn't materialized here in the state. Of course, no election system is perfect, and that's true of ranked choice voting, just like any other election system. But that, I think, is what makes the municipal-based approach wise, is you give your state a chance to kind of have some experience, gain some data, some evidence, and learn about it and how it works. Last thing I'll say is there was a question in the previous committee meeting about what kinds of cities in Utah were participating. And you get a broad range. There's one city with as small as population of 700 people, up kind of where I grew up, a very rural area, to our capital city, Salt Lake City, with over 200,000, and everything in between, suburban, rural, lots of different types of cities. So it was a broad kind of participation, about a little less than 24 cities total participating in the last municipal elections. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and thanks for letting me testify.
7 seconds to spare. Good job. Questions for Mr. Monson? Question from Vice Chairman Knapp.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Munson, you said that no method is perfect. What did you mean by that? What drawbacks did you see in ranked choice?
Mr. Munson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's always going to be questions of a new system with gaining familiarity with it. I think what you've seen in other states, really, I don't know this has popped up as much in Utah, is whether candidates are willing to run on the right kind of campaign to win a ranked choice voting election. That's not so much a systematic defect with the system, but it is something that leads people to think that it's, leads them to raise questions about the system, because you're say telling your people to only rank one person, which that's happened in Alaska. And so when your candidate goes down and you only rank one person, you can have an uncommon outcome for a particular race in the House in that case. So it's just a matter of learning. It's that's kind of, I think, their one potential drawback is you have to learn something new. But people can do that. I think people are doing that. And sometimes improving and taking steps forward requires learning new things and figuring those things out as we go.
Committee? Thank you, Mr. Munson. Next, Mr. Daniels.
Thank
Go
you
ahead.
very much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Josh Daniels, and I was the elected county clerk and auditor in Utah County that oversaw the elections that used this pilot for various cities in our county. If you're familiar with Utah County, it's where Provo is located. It's the second largest county. We do have a partisan election for clerks. So I was a Republican and have used ranked choice voting in both Republican Party operations like local committee elections, but also oversaw these municipal elections in our county for a number of cities over 2 different years. We had a great experience with it. Some of the things that we learned were that we didn't have to change anything about our system. Just like Wyoming, we use ES&S as our vendor for all of our ballot creation, for our ballot printers at our polling locations, for our ballot tabulators or scanners at our polling locations or centrally. So we use the exact same hardware and software as the counties in Wyoming do. And we used our existing system to administer ranked choice voting. All the ranked choice voting did was slightly alter the look and feel of the ballot, at least insofar as there was a ranked choice voting contest. Just there's a slightly different way that the ballot looks when you're ranking the candidates versus using the plurality method. But those ballots can be printed in mixed fashion. You could have a ranked choice voting race on a ballot where you have non-ranked choice voting races. And you can scan those ballots together with any other ballots together at a polling location or at your central tabulation location. And then the results are also pretty easy. There's one additional step at the end where you take the final results of those ballots and there's a data export and you just run that through the process to do the ranking. And there's a free plug-in or add-on that we used for that. Yes.
Go ahead and wrap up your thought. That's your 2 minutes.
That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions for Mr. Daniels? Go ahead, Representative Yin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Daniels, thanks for speaking from real experience. Was there any extra cost, or how would you estimate the cost to add the ranked choice in the
Mr.
ballot?
Daniels?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In our particular case, there was no additional cost. Even though the ballots were designed differently, that didn't cost more to design them differently. And the plug-in that we used at the end to automate that process didn't cost us anything. It's a free utility that's been tested in conjunction with ES&S.
Okay. Any follow-up there, Representative Yin? All right. Very interesting. Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Mr. Lockhart, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name's Stan Lockhart. I'm former Republican Party chairman in the state of Utah. Have roots in Wyoming. My mom's from Thermopolis, so I actually feel at home here. But I also was the director of Utah Ranked Choice Voting that helped persuade cities to use ranked choice voting. We had 2 cities in 2019 use it. We had 23 cities in 2021. Over 200,000 voters had an opportunity to use ranked choice voting for the first time this past cycle. And we had relatively few problems. Voters make ranking choices every day in their lives. Where do we go for dinner? Well, we'd really like to go here, but this place is closer and less expensive. We make choices all the time. So voters figure that out very, very quickly. The history of it in Utah, it really came from conservative grassroots activists that brought ranked choice voting to the Republican Party in the mid-90s. And they wanted to use it in our conventions. So as we started using it in our conventions went from 10-hour experiences to about 4-hour experiences by using ranked choice voting. I was opposed to it until we saw it in use, and it started making sense to me. And then as I started learning more and more and more about the strengths and weaknesses of every voting system, I would put the strengths and the benefits of ranked choice voting up against any. In plurality voting, you get lots of polarization. You're either really, really happy or really, really unhappy with the election. In ranked choice voting, you have a broad spectrum of happiness, and you have more voters who are pretty happy with the election results, and it's more than 50%. Far too often in a plurality election, you get someone nominated out of a primary with 35%, and then they get into a general election and they don't do well either. And it's better to get above 50% if you can. This idea of somehow exhausted ballots being
Mr. Lockhart, go ahead.
disenfranchising.
You got a few seconds there. Just bring your thought to a conclusion.
Yeah, keep in mind that the disenfranchisement comes from self-selection. That voter gets to decide how many rankings they want to make. And in the end, it's the voter's ballot, and we want the voters to make that decision. Thank you very much.
Questions for Mr. Lockhart? Thank you, committee, and thank you, Mr. Lockhart, for tuning in and joining us. Last public testimony I will take on this topic is Ms. Aguiar. Go ahead and unmute yourself and introduce yourself and let us know what you want to hear. And we can't hear you, Cheryl. We still cannot hear you. We're showing you that the screen is muted on our side. Nope, we can't hear you. Sorry, Cheryl. Go ahead and shoot us an email if you want us to know something. It looks like there's a technical difficulty on your end. Yep. Maybe send us an email. Sorry, maybe next time. Thank you. With that, I'm going to close public testimony on this bill. I apologize if it seemed rushed in the last little bit there, folks, but again, standing policy is that if you're in the room, I'm giving you preference because you've taken the time to come here today, and that's just the reality. And then we're on day number 2 of public testimony, so it really feels like we could hear public testimony all day long on this bill, and we appreciate all the sentiments and thoughts coming our way, but at some point we do have to cut it off, and this was an interim topic, so it was also heard over the public testimony was also heard over the interim on it. So with that, closing public testimony on this bill. Committee, what is your pleasure? It's been moved by Representative Yin, seconded by Representative Harshman. Okay. And did we lose Representative Newsom? Sandy, did you want to turn on your camera? Now we'll count you as present for this meeting as long as your camera's on, so I'm going to count you as present. Okay, committee, I won't go page by page through this bill for amendments, but I will ask you if there are any amendments to this bill. Any amendments on this bill? Any discussion on this bill? Sounds like you're eager and ready to vote. Okay. Bob, will you please do a roll call vote on House Bill 49, municipal nonpartisan ranked choice elections?
Representative Chadwick.
No.
Representative Haroldson.
No.
Representative Harshman.
No.
Vice Chairman Knapp.
No.
Representative Newsom.
Aye.
Representative Ottman. No. Representative Wiley.
No.
Representative Yin.
Aye.
Chairman Olson.
Aye.
3 aye. Must be 6 no.
Yep. All right. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 134. Welcome the new representative presenting a bill, Mr. Nyamek, or Representative Nyamek. I don't know if this is the first, is this the first bill you've presented of your own? And the first time. All right, well, welcome to the Corporations Committee.
Mr. Chairman, representatives of the committee, Representative Tony Nemec from House District 60. I bring you House Bill 134, alcohol sales to licensees. What this bill does is 2 years, the state of Wyoming allowed retailers to transfer up to 9 liters of product to another retailer, which really helped out small business. What this bill does is opens that up to the Wyoming distilleries with their tasting rooms, that a retailer could also get that same amount of product from them. So if you'd like me to go through the bill.
Please.
So if you go to page 2, scratches out to a satellite location on line 2 to 3, and also down to line 18 under 124201. It deletes at retail, and then it adds onto lines 20 through 22, or from a holder of a manufacturer's license under Wyoming statute 122203, who's a federally licensed distiller or rectifier. And that's basically the bill. However, there is a friendly amendment that should be brought in soon.
So Representative, in summary, the meat of the bill really is right there on page 2 at the bottom, lines 14 through 22 at right, as I'm reading it. In essence, it allows a licensee to purchase I guess 9 liters is a case.
Of
So-
750 milliliter bottles, correct?
Yeah, so it allows the purchase of 1 case per week by the licensee directly from the distillery.
Yes,
And that's
from
that's
the
it?
tasting room where the satellite license.
Okay, and that is it.
Correct.
All
Mr.
right.
Chairman.
Because otherwise, the other way to look at it is that's prohibited. You have to buy, as if you're the licensee, you have to purchase directly from the liquor, is it the liquor division or the
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
you can't purchase directly from the distiller.
Correct.
Okay. All right. And this goes into effect July 1st, 2023. Committee questions for the representative? All right, and you were starting to talk, oh, sorry, go ahead, Representative
Chairman,
Harshman.
is there a fiscal note? I mean, is there an impact to the state?
Representative Nymek?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Harshman, very minimal.
Well, your minimal might be different than my minimal.
I think Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Representative Harshman, I think if we have a representative from the Wyoming Liquor Division, they'd be able to answer that better than I could.
And we do?
So, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
so Representative Nymek, is it Nemec or Nymek? It's with a E, right? Nemec.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Harshman, it's Nemec.
Yeah, that's.
I'm
okay.
messing that up.
No, I want to get that right. Yeah, I just got to read, but it's spelled N-I-E. The I is silent. Got it. Okay. That's where we're at. Now, Representative Nemec, so just tell us exactly, like, say in my hometown, there's a vodka distillery. In fact, was part of the reason we have this satellite law. Former President Perkins, I think, brought that maybe. And so how do they sell right now? They brew, they distill it in Casper. Then what happens to their product right now?
Representative Nemec?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Harshman.
And let's say somebody else in Casper wants to buy it, right? Another liquor store.
Right now, if that was Mr. Chairman, Representative Harshman, right now, if that was they would have to go through the Wyoming Liquor Division.
So the distiller.
Representative Harshman?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, my apologies. Mr. Chairman, Representative Nemec, so the distiller then has to ship the product to Cheyenne. And then the product gets shipped back to a liquor store in Casper that wants to buy it. Is that how I understand it?
Representative Nemec?
I'm kind of looking for nodding heads out there too.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Harshman, yes, that's true.
And, Mr. Chairman, so then the liquor division, since we're a control state, which I support, by the way, but we have a markup on it, which pays the bills, right, and provides some revenue, but that's the markup part we're gonna miss, is how I understand it. No, I'm seeing a no about there.
Representative Nemec?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Harshman, that product that's at that distillery is already made it through the system. I believe the tax is already paid, so there's no loss to the state there.
Okay, so just the Mr. Chairman, the logistics then, so that distiller in Casper then wouldn't send the product to Cheyenne to get shipped up here to a liquor store in Casper. Could literally sell it across town directly? Is that how that works? Not quite. I'm seeing some not quite maybe. Okay, I need to learn some more, so appreciate you bringing the bill. Thank you,
So
Mr. Chairman.
it sounds like they could sell the case directly to the retailer in their town, but the tax is still remitted on the nothing changes with the tax.
Correct, Mr. Chairman.
And it's one case per week?
Yes.
Okay. Representative Wiley.
Representative Nemec. So I could see how this would be applicable to like a special run or something that's very limited since it's such a small, one case per week, the small liters. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Wiley, that's correct.
Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Nemec, or Representative Nemec, what was the situation that prompted this bill?
Representative Nemec.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ottman. Well, 2 years ago, when they passed the transfer from retailer to retailer, that really helps a retailer if they happen to run out of that certain product. We could go across town to another retailer, pick up some of theirs, and then continue selling. The reason for this is some of those distillers in their tasting rooms, they may have a lot of product that they can't sell out of their tasting rooms. So it opens it up to limited quantities that a retailer could pick some of that up and sell it in their stores.
All right, thank you, Representative. Stick around. We'll go to our liquor division next. And there maybe there'll be additional questions for you, but just stick around, just in case. Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, committee, thank you. I am Tom Montoya. I am the Administrator of the Department of Revenue Liquor Division. This particular bill, when it was sent to me by the LSO for a fiscal impact statement, when it originally came to me, what I had to look at is, are the taxes being remitted to the state? And the LSO revised the bill upon our suggesting adding in on line 1, 122303 through page 2, line 12, because that gave the manufacturer's ability to remit to the state the 17.6% markup and, of course, the excise tax on the spirits. And that basically, then with the bottom part of the bill, that would allow a manufacturer, which is going to be a distiller or a rectifier, to sell directly to another retailer in limited quantities, meaning 9 liters or 1 case per week. That it really kind of piggybacked off a bill that happened in 2019. Over the years, the liquor division had been getting complaints from basically package stores that said, hey, the local restaurant that has a license or the small bar down the street has a license, and they came to me on a Friday night because they couldn't get it from you. You were closed after that. And so, excuse me. So after a period of time, they went to Mr. Mosier, and Mr. Mosier made sure that a bill was passed that allowed them so that they wouldn't be breaking the law in case that they ever ran out of whatever spirit they needed to continue through the weekend, and then they could reorder from us in quantity. And it's worked out quite well.
Vice Chairman Knapp.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Montoya, would there be any type of tracking, or would there need to be any type of tracking for this since you already paid the tax on the initial sale? Who tracks the volume of what's going to these establishments?
Mr. Montoya.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Knapp, this is going to be kind of a new concept. Currently, this isn't allowed in statutes because of the 3-tier system. Basically, what happens, like in Representative Harshman's example, the distillery there in Mills. What they do is they will sell their product to the Wyoming Liquor Division, and at that point, we will add the 17.6% markup, and we collect the excise taxes and we sell it to local retailers. In the case of distillers that have a satellite manufacturing license, and that's issued by the local authorities. So for instance, this distillery in Mills, they actually went to the city of Casper because they wanted to have a store in the city of Casper. Okay, and that particular store in Casper will order their product from us. Now, they also have a satellite at their distillery. Okay, and what this law is, and it's really the first part under 12.2303, they can transfer that product. The distillers asked the legislature a number of years ago if, since the manufacturing facility and the satellite were on the same premise, could they just transfer that product and then just do the paperwork to us? In other words, they would remit a report with the excise tax and the 17% markup. And that has worked out quite well. We have 15 manufacturer licenses, that's distillers and rectifiers, and 11 of them currently have satellite locations.
Well, oh, sorry,
No, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Follow up, Representative Knapp?
Mr. Chairman, then why the limit itself then? If that transfer is allowed, the taxes are being paid, what impetus was the limit on the amount?
It's called Kumbaya.
Mr. Chairman, that's basically it, Representative Knapp. That's what an agreement between those parties that were involved, the distillers, the liquor retailers at that time, that's how they came together and put together a bill.
Mm-hmm. Representative Harshman?
Mr. Chairman, Director, you had a good story going, telling us how it was, and then you stopped. And then, you know, how the tasting room on the premise of the distillery or whatever, is through a paperwork transaction, they can basically transfer it to themselves to use it, right? I mean,
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
and
There's
and
two levels of that. One.
That's why I want
for-
you to continue.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Harshman, the distillers or the rectifiers, okay, they can transfer product, and it's the 17.6% and the excise taxes are not included on that, but that's for tasting purposes only. They can't sell the product, and they're limited on what they can. I think it's 3 ounces. And it can be 1 3-ounce, or maybe they have 6 products and it can be, you know, just a little bit of each product, just so that the quantity doesn't go over 3 ounces. We don't have staff there that measures that to do that. You know, our kind of philosophy is on that they're not there to give away all their free product. They want to make sure that they sell it. And, you know, we have a great working relationship with all of our manufacturers. So it's worked out pretty well. The other half of that equation is they can sell it to us. You know, they usually will either drive it to us, like there's a gentleman in Pine Bluffs that has a distillery. There's one in Cheyenne that has a distillery, and they just bring it over in their pickup. Anybody's allowed to do that. Or oftentimes, because we have such a great contract with North Park Transportation that delivers all of our outbound liquor in the state of Wyoming, except Cheyenne, they will contract with North Park to bring our product there. Oftentimes, we just cross-dock it. Another means we receive it, and then we ship it right back to their satellite.
And Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
And then this bill solves what problem?
Mr. Montoya?
Mr. Chairman, this bill will work, but there is an amendment. I believe Mr. Pickard or Mr. Mosier are going to present that, which would be a better solution to this. And basically, it allows for the satellite manufacturers, because they can sell to the public. The only license currently today that can sell to another licensee would be a retail license, those who have a package store. And so if like a example I gave earlier, if a small restaurant or a small bar down the street were to run out of a particular spirit on a Friday night, they could go to a local package store and buy up to a case of that particular product, and it'll get them through the weekend. And then, of course, that next week they can order from us, and we'll have it to them the next day.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Montoya. Sounds like we're eager to hear this amendment.
Mr. Chairman, too, I don't have a formal handout, But the other day, if you remember, when you were in the Senate committee hearing for Senate File 13,
Yes,
I had the,
you gave me this.
yes, and basically that's a short version of our census report.
Okay.
And I have enough copies if the committee would like to want to. I traditionally, for the last 20 years, I've handed them out to Corporations Committee. But basically what this is just a list of all the different licenses we have for each and every community based on the population formulas that they're, and I'd be more than happy to give the
Yeah,
committee
please,
one.
please do, committee. I think this handout is very helpful for you. There are bills over on the Senate side making their way to us. I guess possibly just one bill now that deals with licenses. So I think it's helpful for you to have this census in front
With
of
your
you.
permission, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
please. Mr. Pickard, Mr. Mosier, why don't you both come on up? Welcome, Mr. Mosier and Mr. Pickard. We know we have your amendment in front of us. We want to
Excellent.
discuss that and want to discuss whatever else you
All
find
right.
is pertinent to the bill.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Dave Pickard. I'm before you representing the Wyoming Spirits Brokers Association. What the association does is represents spirits brokers that basically are part of the wholesale tier. We are the tier that sells to the liquor division. As Representative Harshman mentioned, we are a control state. So what I thought I'd do very briefly, and in your handouts, I hope you have received them. You've got two specific handouts about the three-tier system. And again, members of the committee that haven't served in the legislature or are new to the committee might not be as familiar with the three-tier system. And so I thought I'd provide that handout. What it does is it protects the transactions after the 21st Amendment was passed and ratified by the United States. It devolved liquor control to the 50 states. And through that is a three-tier system, whereas there's the producer, and in the case of Wyoming statutes, it's called the manufacturer. Then you have the distributor, and then you have the retail. Again, three tiers of it. In Wyoming, because we are a control state, that middle tier being the distributor and the wholesaler, I wouldn't say that the lines are blurred because they're very strict, but out of the manufacturers sell to the wholesalers, which I represent. We sell to the liquor division or transfer to the liquor division, which then is all encompassed in that middle tier. And then the liquor division provides it out to the retailers. And what we're talking about here is spirits and wine. The beer distribution network in the state of Wyoming is still a three-tier system. It has the manufacturers, which are the brewers. It has the wholesalers that do not go through the liquor division. They go through your independent wholesalers. I think there's 8 or 10 of them around the state of Wyoming, and then ultimately to the retailers. And the reason for all of this is that we're not selling potato chips. We're selling a dangerous product. Alcohol is dangerous. It has been recognized as such by our society in the United States from the beginning of our nationhood. We had significant discussions about this in the 1920s. I wasn't around, in the 1930s, and ultimately the passage of the 21st Amendment. But it's still recognized not only by policymakers throughout the United States, but consumers and regulators that it is a dangerous product. So we treat it differently. Our position from the wholesale channel is to protect the three-tier system. We don't want to see any erosion to it. And in this case, we looked at this bill, we support the intent of the bill, and we support what Representative Nemec is attempting to do, because we recognize that there are challenges for our craft distillers in the state of Wyoming. And also the intent of the law that was adopted in 2019 was to allow for those occasional sales in which, if you look in statute, it actually is titled outages. And it's simply what Mr. Montoya talked about, which is the liquor division doesn't deliver product, NPT doesn't deliver product 7 days a week. And if you have, you know, a retailer, whether it be off-premise or on-premise retailer, say here in Cheyenne during Frontier Days, that might run out of the number one spirit, which is Crown Royal. And instead of losing those sales, he can run down to a neighbor facility retailer and pick up some product and take it back to his location and sell it. All of the taxes in that type of transaction have been paid. The markup is already been taken care of. There are forms that are filled out as are directed in statute in order to track that, so that there's not retail to retail sales out there that are not being reported to the liquor division. I'm assuming that they track those to make sure that they're in compliance with the 9 liters. But in essence, and I think I'll let Mr. Mosier give you more examples of what the retail looks like. But it's not necessarily a case every week for 52 weeks. It is really, you know, something that through supply chain and customer preferences, et cetera, you know, we've recognized that there ought to be a little bit of give and take in our system to allow that. So, Mr. Chairman, we did look at this bill. I worked with Representative Nemec, worked with Mr. Mosier, worked with Mr. Montoya to bring an amendment that really tightens up the bill, so there's really no ambiguity in it in what we're attempting to do. So if you'll look at, or Mr. Chairman, I might stop there and ask if there's any questions before we get to the amendment.
Are there questions for Mr. Pickard before we get to the amendment? Nope. All right,
Okay.
go ahead.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, if you look at the amendment, what we are proposing is to go on page 1, lines 13 and 14, the last 2 lines of the first page, delete that. Page 2, lines 1 through 12, delete that entirely, all of that language. Essentially, we're taking out the section of 12-2-303, which is the purchase and sale of alcoholic liquor shortages, because what the original language attempts to do is insert 12-4-201J into that. We address that in our amending language by referencing the appropriate section in statute. So again, we ask that that section be removed. And then in the new language, you're looking at page 2, line 17. We believe, and in consultation with the division, that the words "at retail" need to be reinserted into language. Again, what we're going to talk about here is a distiller's satellite location that is selling at retail to another retailer. So it goes back to the intent of what the 2019 legislation proposed and did enact. And then we insert the word "satellite" on page 2, line 21 after manufacturers. So it's going to read, or from the holder of the manufacturer's satellite license under, and then we amend the citation that is in the draft bill or the introduced bill at 12-2-203A. We amend that to include section G, Romanet 1, which is directly defining the satellite location. With that, Mr. Chairman, we believe that it preserves the sanctity of the 3-tier system. It accomplishes precisely what the bringer of the bill desires to do. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions.
Okay, so my only question is, and I think I was getting a head nod, and I think you said this, just Representative Nemec, this is friendly, this is a kumbaya moment with you and the others as well. Okay. Thank you. Representative Harshman.
Mr. Chairman, just so I can get my little brain wrapped around this. So the example, the distiller in Mills who has a satellite in Casper. Now, if another business down the street, down Center Street, runs out of this product, they can go to this satellite around the block, 200 feet away, and grab a case and purchase a case and not have to go out to the Mills distillery. Is that really, or am I missing something?
Mr. Pickard?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Harshman, that is correct. That's my understanding of how this would operate, because it is coming from the satellite, and the satellite location owns the retail license. But I see my colleague to the right of me, which is untrue, but to the right of me today, would like to opine on this.
He's on our left, yeah. Okay, but yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mosier.
Mr. Chairman, Mike Mosier, Wyoming State Liquor Association. Thank you to the colleague at the left of me for carrying the weight on this. I'm sorry I'm a little late. We had another liquor bill on third floor. Quickly, and I'll answer your question and then your question. We support the bill. We support the amendment. This is indeed a kumbaya moment. To answer your question, yes, but on the other hand, the reason why this is needed for smaller retailers in particular is I can order any product in the planet from Mr. Montoya, but I have to order it by the case. And so if I come down to Cheyenne and I go to a cute little place downtown and I'm a retailer, it's like, man, I'd like to carry some of this, but I don't want to buy a whole case. That's what you do it for. And in response to your question, they have to do the 17.6% markup and the excise tax, but they also have a profit margin. So I'll be able to get it cheaper from the liquor division. So what, does it work well at a small scale? Yeah, but on the other hand, if you think that's a great way to order bulk product, you probably shouldn't be in business. When we supported Senate File 113, the bill that Mr. Pickard, Mr. Montoya mentioned, that allowed retail to retail, that's exactly what it addressed. And I can speak as a former retailer from personal experience. You'd run out of Crown Royal and I'd call the bar down the street and say, can I borrow a couple bottles? Well, we just codified it because everybody was doing it anyway. In this case, this allows the 15 or so distilleries to do retail to retail in that same sense. Bear in mind, as most of you know, Wyoming brings a lot of money in on alcohol. We bring as much per capita as Colorado, but the difference is ours is off the markup at the liquor division, the 17.6%. And so we wanted to make sure that the state would continue to collect that revenue on those sales, which this bill does. And we wanted to make sure we maintain the integrity of the three-tiered system. So this is a retail to retail sale. It's not a wholesale to retail sale. Like I said, these distilleries will never be our primary source because it's not prudent for business, but it's kind of fun. It's nice to go up to your place up in Mills, and I'm a retailer and I like that stuff, but a case I don't know about. And that's the driver in these particular ones. So I see it as a win-win. It is not going to be a massive thing. It's just nice to be able to get, especially with our Wyoming products, which we all love, give retailers a chance to try a couple bottles, see if it moves. If it does, order a case from these guys because the cost will probably be a lot better. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would ask the committee to support the bill, support the amendment, hold hands, sing Kumbaya. Thank you.
Committee, additional questions for Mr. Mosier and Mr. Pickard? All right, thank you both. Additional public
Thank you.
testimony in the, in the room. Testimony online. Raise your hand if you want to testify on this bill. We have one, it looks like. Yep, go ahead. Okay, go ahead and let Miss Forrester in. Welcome, Ms. Forrester. Go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know what you want us to hear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Michelle Forrester. I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Distillers Guild, the nonprofit trade association that protects and promotes the interests of Wyoming's craft distillers. The Wyoming Distillers Guild stands in support of House Bill 134. We believe this bill provides benefit to both our partners in retail as well as Wyoming's small and intrepid craft distillers. by providing some flexibility in how they can work together. The bill creates a mechanism through which Wyoming retailers may obtain a small amount of product directly from a distillery. This is most important in the case of limited or special releases from our distillers who generally produce such items in very small quantities. And it is not unusual for a retailer to wish to purchase only a few bottles for their inventory, as has been previously said today. By providing this mechanism, the bill supports a pathway to continued growth for Wyoming businesses, greater partnership between retailers and manufacturers, and we believe it's beneficial to the industry as a whole. And that is why we are happy to stand with our retail partners in support of this bill. And I thank you all for your consideration. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Ms. Forrester? Thank you, Ms. Forrester, for tuning in. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any additional public testimony on this bill? No public testimony remaining. I'll close public testimony. What is your pleasure? Moved by Representative Harshman and seconded by Representative Chadwick.
Move the amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Harshman would like to move the amendment in front of us.
Second.
Seconded by Representative Wiley. You have a copy of this amendment, Barb? Perfect. Discussion on the amendment? We had quite a bit of it already. Question on the amendment? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That amendment has been adopted. Are there additional amendments on this bill? Any discussion on this bill? Question being called on the bill. Barb, will you do a roll call vote on House Bill 134, alcohol sales to licensees?
Representative Chadwick?
Aye.
Representative Haroldson?
Aye.
Representative Harshman?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Knapp?
Aye.
Representative Newsom?
Aye.
Thank you. Representative Ottman?
Aye.
Representative Wiley?
Aye.
Representative Yin?
Aye.
Chairman Olson?
Aye.
All in favor?
All right. Next and last bill for our consideration is House Bill 142. Sensing we have about 15 minutes to wrap this up. I do think we're going to be able to get through this bill committee in those 15 minutes if we're judicious with our time. Just bear in mind, we already had an annexation bill in front of us. This bill is an amendment that was put into that House bill. So you've already seen this exact language once in front of you. Representative Majority Whip Western, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Olson, members of the committee. I will try to be as brief as I can. You know, the kind of the genesis of this is it's a constituent bill that came to me from my community in Sheridan that had some issues, and this is the kind of the remedy we came up with. Obviously, we've already seen this language on the House floor and debated it quite a bit, so I'm not going to belabor the point. Obviously, the meat of it is right there in Romanet VI, just adding that 550-foot mark. So that's kind of the substance of it. Happy to answer any questions.
So Majority Whip, in essence, what this bill does is when we're sending a notice to persons who might be involved in the annexation, instead of just sending it to those within the boundary of the annexation, your bill says that if you are a property owner within 550 feet of that annexation, you get notice.
Mr. Chairman, that is exactly correct.
All right. Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Western, so would the 550, the outliers, would that be first-class mail or would that be certified?
I believe it's, Mr. Chairman,
Majority Whip Western.
I believe that's first-class mail.
It's
Certified mail, pardon me, corrected, certified mail.
Line 3, page 2. Representative Harshman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Why 550 feet? I mean, why isn't 500, 200, 1,000?
Mr.
It's a
Mr.
local
Chairman,
issue.
Representative Harshman, because the constituent in question was 459 feet from annexation. But jokes, that was just what was recommended to me. I mean, should the committee wish to increase or decrease that, obviously that is well within your purview, so.
What was the constituent really, 459 feet? Or?
I don't know the exact distance, but that was an issue that came up, was that they felt they were, hey, I didn't get the notice I felt due, so.
Okay. Committee? All right. Well, thank you, Representative Western. Excuse me, Majority Whip Western. I'm still getting used to that. Wham or Mayor Collins? Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Patrick Collins, Mayor of Cheyenne. Couple thoughts. One is, I think our current annexation laws, as they are good laws, and they're well thought out, and I think they work real well. There's one glaring weakness, in my opinion, and that is the law currently says that we have to send an annexation notice to the folks who live within the area being annexed. And it doesn't require us to send something to the outside area. Full transparency, we probably should do a better job of that. We should be sending notices to folks who are adjacent to the area being annexed. I think that's the right thing to do. We spent a little time, my staff did, and they called around the state to find out what other communities are doing. And what I learned is that the majority of them are sending notices for the zoning that is required, because state law says when we annex a piece of property, we also have to give it a city zone. And so as it's at the same time we're zoning it, we're sending out notices to people who are being the zone will change. So it might be an agricultural zone, might leave it agricultural, but it has to be a city zone. And the average that I found across the state is 300 feet. Some are a little less than that. I didn't find any more than that. And so I'm here today to speak in favor of this, the idea that you have before you today. I believe we should do a better job of sending notice out. And I'd ask you for two things. One, to take it from 550 feet to be consistent with what we're doing in zoning across the state. Which would be 300 feet. And instead of making it first class or making it certified mail, make it first class mail. And my reason for that is two things. The city of Cheyenne doesn't pay for those notices. The folks doing the annexation do. And as the chairman knows, in Cheyenne, we have 65 small county pockets surrounded by the city. And one of those folks' septic system or well fails, they've got to hook up. And if you take 550 feet, now you're talking $700, $800 in certified mail costs. And then they've still got to pay $10,000 or $12,000 or $15,000 to hook up. And so if they could do it for $50 in first class mail, and if the reason to do this is to make sure people know what's going on, first class mail would do that. And we do a really good job of tracking those notices to make sure it happens. So I very much speak in favor of the idea of transparency and doing it. Ask you to amend it to 300 feet and make it first class, and I'll do everything I can to help you pass it.
Questions for Mayor Collins? Representative Ottman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mayor, if the city does a really good job about tracking the notices, then I wouldn't have seen such a outcry from the people that came, I don't think. The other thing is that with first class mail, as long as the mail isn't returned to the post office, nobody knows if the intended party actually received it. So what do you see about that? Because we have a transient society. I mean, that's just the matter of it. So how do you see that it could be better tracked? What do you think that might look like? Thank
Mayor
you.
Collins?
Mr. Chairman, through you, I apologize. I wasn't there Monday for that meeting because I think I could have answered a lot of those questions. We were doing the Martin Luther King March, and I was on the steps of the Capitol doing that instead of in your committee meeting. And I apologize. I should have been here. What I think you learned was people were saying they didn't get notice for the annexation, and they didn't, because the city of Cheyenne is not required to send notice to people outside the area being annexed. And so they say, well, I'm in the area. Well, yes, you are, but you're not in the area inside the annexation. And so the state law doesn't require the annexation. That's why I'm here today to say I think we need to do a better job of letting people outside the area know an annexation is coming. And that's why I'm in support of this, because currently it's not required, and we should be doing that. The requirement would be not to the renter that lives there, but to the property owner. At least as I understand it. And I don't think those are as transient maybe as people who come and go. In Cheyenne, we have the base, and a lot of people move in and move out. But the owner of those properties would get notice. And I have here with me today the logs that show how we handle that. So we take pictures, we take them to the post office, and I guess I hate to say you have to trust us, but we really do a good job of doing that. So if you ask anybody in that group if they got the notice for the zone change, every one of them did, because we're required to send it on our own rules 300 feet. And so everybody who got a notice within 300 feet got that. I guess I'm not sure how to say it other than the fact that you're right, there was a lot of people here, but I think it's because they didn't understand the annexation laws. When we say we send it to the people in the area, they thought that because they live 2 blocks away, they would have gotten a notice. And what I'm saying is we should do that, and I'm supportive of that idea.
And this bill solves that problem.
Yes.
Representative Ottman?
Mr. Chairman, well, then maybe this is a moot question, but if you send out currently the certified notices and they are not delivered, what do you do with those?
Mayor Collins?
Mr. Chairman, through you, most of, I would say 99% of the annexations we do as a city are either city-owned property where we bought a piece of property for the Greenway, we annex it, or they're people who come to us asking to be part of the city. So this last year, we annexed 1,400 acres of property. One of them was a 1,200 acre business park, and the rest of them were really small, like single lots or, acre-sized pieces of property. Every one of those, it was because the people who were inside the area came to us and asked us to be annexed. And so we send them and the utility the required notices. And I'm not sure we've ever had those not come back because the people who are asking us to be annexed give us their address. We mail it to them under the certification. I don't know how to answer that other than to say I just haven't seen that happen. Now, in the zone change, I'm sure there are some of those that come back where the owners are different. And I would have to ask my staff how they handle that. But I think that's a fairly rare occurrence. We have to go to the county to find out who the owners of those properties are, the current register, and that's how we pick those names and who we send them to. Yeah.
Representative Chadwick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor Collins, in your experience, what are the reasons that people don't receive those notices? I'm sure there's a myriad of them, but if you would speak to that.
Mr. Chairman, through you, Representative, I'm sure there are times when a property has changed hands and the notice hasn't gotten to the county yet so that we don't have the current owner's name and address. So I think that could happen. I'm positive that there are opportunities maybe where the post office just misdelivers it, but I think that's fairly rare. I think that when we send notice out, almost without exception, those get there. Our certified ones, I have the logs here that I could show you. The certified ones for the area, they always come back to us as received. But again, those are always willing people who are asking to be part of the city. As far as the ones in the zone change, the area outside of that, the 300 feet, the vast majority of those are done. But I'm sure there are opportunities where people who you just recently bought a house and it hasn't gotten to the county yet. Those would be an opportunity, I think, where we might miss a homeowner. But I think that would be the same if they were a certified mail.
Follow-up?
Thank you. And another issue that has come to my attention is the pre-agreements that cities do with adjoining properties when they provide services.
Yes, sir.
Mostly that's the root of those. How does this annexation affect those? Any idea?
Mayor Collins?
Okay, I think I understand your question. And we're a perfect example of that. We have the Southside Water and Sewer District. We have 13,000 people who live there. In 1970 or 1969, their water service failed. And they came to the city and asked for water. And we said, absolutely, we would be happy to help. But what we don't want to create is a barrier to our ability to grow. So in order to do that, we'll be happy to provide you water. But there's going to be a time when the city grows to you that you have to acquiesce to being annexed at that time. Well, they came to the border probably 1980, and they're still not annexed. But we have written agreements from those folks, and it says in that agreement, I have a copy if you'd like to see it here, that says that when the city comes, you, your heirs, successors, future owners of property agree that when the city is ready to annex, you have to agree to do that. And that's a contingency upon giving them water. Otherwise, we're creating a barrier for our ability to grow. And we would have to say no. And I don't want to say no to people who need infrastructure, but I also don't want to hurt future governing bodies' ability to grow the city for whatever reason that might be.
Any further questions for Mayor Collins? All right. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Appreciate it. Yep. Director Frazier, are you good or? Okay. Does anyone have any questions for the, for Director Frazier? No? Okay. Any additional public testimony in the room? Ms. Urbakite online? Go ahead and let her in. Welcome, Ms. Urbakite. Go ahead and unmute and turn on your camera and let us know your thoughts. Hello.
There I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lori Urbakite with Wyoming Realtors. I'll talk really fast. We are supportive of this bill, and we also are supportive of the suggested amendment by the mayor, which would be on line 5. I think after the word "and," insert "by first-class mail." These are the people that are the neighbors. They are not the ones that are being actually annexed. And so I think the first-class mail is fine. The 550 feet, it is my understanding that that was the same as other zoning or subdivision laws. I can't verify that, but that's what I was told. We have no problem with 300 feet. That seems quite reasonable. And I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Urbakite? All right. Thanks, Lori, for tuning in with us.
Thank you.
I'll close public testimony. Committee, what is your pleasure? Moved by Representative Harshman, seconded by Representative Haroldson. Amendment on page 2, line 3. Anyone want to make this amendment for
Mr.
first-class
Chairman.
mail?
I'll make both amendments at the same time. So we'll add by first-class mail
Let's
after.
take them one at a time because they are
Okay.
substantively different.
Then I will do that, Mr. Chairman. So
Okay.
on page 2, line 5, after the word "and," add "by first-class mail."
All right. Moved by Representative Yin, seconded by Representative Chadwick. Yep, Representative Haroldson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Current rate is $4.27 per certified mail. And our church just got done doing this. It can equal out to thousands of dollars. And so it's a huge cost savings if it doesn't have to be certified. Obviously, everyone inside needs to be certified because they're being affected. Everyone around it, it's more of a notification. So I definitely think this is a good amendment.
Okay. Additional discussion on the amendment?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Was first-class mail in 2 spots or
Not,
just on line 3?
I think in my,
Mr. Chairman, the amendment is only on line 5 after the word "and." Add "by first-class mail."
well,
So
so
are
what's
we
the
gonna-
notice on line 3?
The notice on line 3 is for all the landowners within the territory being annexed, should be by certified mail. So you only want the
That's
new folks who are being just notified.
Got it.
Yeah, so only the line 5 is the necessary amendment.
Does that make sense, Barb?
Yes, so not on line 3 at all.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Further discussion on the amendment? We're now clear on the amendment. Question on the amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That amendment, one no, that amendment has been adopted. Okay. Additional amendments, Representative Yin?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I'll make the other requested amendment, which is instead of 550 on line 6, change it to 300.
Okay. Seconded by Representative Chadwick. Is there any discussion on this amendment? Question on the amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That amendment has been adopted. Barb, will you please take a roll call vote on House Bill 0142, Notice of Annexation?
Representative Chadwick? Representative Haroldson? Representative Harshman? Vice Chairman Knapp?
Aye.
Representative Newsom?
Excused.
Representative Ottman? Representative Wiley?
Aye.
Representative Yin? Chairman Olson?
Aye.
8 ayes, 1 excused.
All right, committee, and just briefly, I want to say, really good job today. You got through 3 bills, but for future meetings, please, please, please go, if you're getting food, try to do that within 5 minutes, 10 minutes max. We're starting 10 to 15 minutes late every meeting because we're off trying to grab lunch, and that's impacting our ability to get through bills. We're going to have 4 bills on Wednesday, so please, please get your food and get here as fast as you can.